Hi everyone, my name is Dan and I'm a mental health pharmacist, and today I wanted to make a video about memory and language learning. Working in healthcare, I meet many patients who only speak Spanish. I also have many friends and students who are bilingual, and I set a goal for myself to learn another language. I've struggled to learn languages in the past, so I've taken formal classes at a university in Spanish for 2 semesters. I've done Duolingo every day for months. I've watched a few series on TV completely in Spanish with Spanish subtitles. All of these methods have certainly helped, but I wanted to see if there's anything that I could do to speed up my language learning processes. I decided to try a few different experiments. Ice baths, cold plunges, all sorts of cold exposure are touted as being good for the mind and the body. So first, I wanted to see if cold exposure would help with memory. I decided to put this to the test by learning the preterite tense, which is a tense in Spanish, followed by cold exposure, as compared to learning the imperfect tense, followed by no cold exposure. Next, I wanted to see what could help me with learning vocabulary more quickly. So I decided to try a rosemary supplement and listening to classical music while studying, as compared to how I learned vocabulary at baseline. So let's start by discussing cold exposure experiment that I completed. Ice baths are often talked about as a way to improve physical and mental health. Some people even say that ice baths can help with memory. So I looked at a study that wanted to see if an ice bath after learning something helped with memory consolidation. This hypothesis was tested by administering cold pressor stress or no temperature changes after subjects viewed a variety of different slides of varying emotional content. What this found was that 1 week later, memory was improved for emotionally arousing slides, but not for the regular slides. Other studies show that while the person is actively cold, memory is worsened. So for the purposes of my experiment, I didn't want to be actively cold while learning Spanish. I wanted to learn something in Spanish, then be exposed to the cold and see if this helped with my memory. For this experiment, I focused on 2 tenses in the past in Spanish, the preterite and the imperfect tenses. First, I learned the preterite tense by taking lessons on SpanishDict.com. This is a free website that has so many useful tools and lessons with videos, quizzes, and much more. Now, I don't have an ice bath available, but I wanted to see how helpful a freezing cold shower could be after learning Spanish. Well, it wasn't quite freezing because the coldest my shower would go was 44 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 6 degrees Celsius, but this was certainly cold enough to make me feel very cold and very uncomfortable. After learning the tense, I took a cold shower for about 2 minutes to consolidate this memory. I waited 1 week before testing myself on this preterite tense on the information that I had learned. The test consisted of a few components. I had to write the verb endings, take the SpanishDict.com lessons, remember 3 irregular verbs, and complete a tense quiz on StudySpanish.com. So after I learned the material, took the cold shower, I waited a week, and then I tested myself. I was able to correctly write the verb endings, and I completed 2 sets of lessons and made a total of 3 errors. Additionally, I was able to correctly write out all 3 irregular conjugations for ir, ser, and ver. Finally, I took the quiz on StudySpanish.com, and I scored a 19 out of 20, which is a 95%. Altogether, my score was a 51 out of 55, and I scored a 93% on the preterite quizzes that I made for myself. So now I needed something to compare this to. So I wanted to learn another past tense called the imperfect tense. I tried to mimic exactly what I did for learning the preterite, so I took all the lessons on SpanishDict.com to start, just like I did before. Then I took a regular, good old-fashioned shower to see how well my memories would stick without the cold water. 1 week later, I completed the same test as before. So I wrote out all the verb endings correctly. I then completed the lessons again and made 4 errors, which was 1 error more than I made with the preterite tense. As for the irregular verbs, I was only able to remember two of them, ir and ser, and I had completely forgotten ver. Finally, on the studyspanish.com quiz, I scored an 18 out of 20, which is a 90%. Altogether, my score was 44 out of 55, which is an 80%. This showed that for me personally, the cold exposure did potentially help with memory consolidation, as my score was 13% higher as compared to no cold exposure. Now I wanted to see what methods could help me to learn Spanish vocabulary more quickly. First, I needed to establish a baseline to see how strong my memory was without any difference in supplements or my routine. I again utilized the website SpanishDict.com, and it has a great tool, which is a bunch of vocabulary word lists. I utilized the beginner 1,000-word vocabulary flashcard set, and I counted how many mistakes I made after each flashcard set. At the end of 2 weeks, I averaged 8.10 mistakes per flashcard set, with my best score being only 2 mistakes, and my worst test, I had 15 mistakes. Now that I had a baseline, I decided to compare this to rosemary supplements. Natural Medicine's database has only 3 supplements that it deems as possibly effective for memory, and many more that it rates as having insufficient evidence. The 3 supplements that Natural Medicine's database deemed to be possibly effective were rosemary oral supplementation, caffeine, and tyrosine. Out of these 3, I decided to try rosemary. First, let's look at the evidence that supports the use of rosemary for memory. A study out of Iran included 79 students and had them take 500 milligrams of rosemary twice daily for 1 month. Memory was improved by 14% as compared to the placebo group. I purchased a product that was 700 milligrams of rosemary, and I took this twice daily for 1 month. My average number of mistakes per Spanish test was 7.15 on rosemary, with my best test having 3 mistakes and my worst test having 10 mistakes. This represented a 13% improvement from my baseline, which is very similar to the study out of Iran where that was a 14% difference. So now that I had a baseline and I tested the rosemary supplementation, I then wanted to try one more thing, which was listening to classical music while I completed these vocabulary flashcard sets. Music, especially classical music, is commonly stated to improve memory. I wanted to check the evidence and put this to the test. A study of 65 older adults compared the effects that silence, white noise, Mozart, or Mahler had on memory. Both the Mozart and Mahler group showed a significant advantage in episodic memory compared to silence. So next, I completed the Spanish flashcard sets for 2 more weeks while listening to classical music. I felt that the music was a little distracting, so I thought that my scores would worsen, but I was surprised to see that my scores continued to improve even further. My average number of mistakes I made while listening to music was 5.5 per test, with my best test having 0 mistakes and my worst test having 17 mistakes. This represented a 32% improvement in my scores as compared to baseline. Overall, I think the biggest strengths of these experiments was that they motivated me to study more. So I was excited each night to go through some Spanish flashcard sets because I was curious to see if the music, the rosemary, the ice baths would help with my memory. So I think my excitement for learning was increased and just caused me to study a lot more than I would have otherwise. A weakness of these experiments was that I felt that my Spanish was just improving over time. So I'm unsure that classical music was the most effective, followed by rosemary, followed by my baseline, or maybe after my baseline and I completed the rosemary, my Spanish was improving, and as I went to the classical music, my Spanish had improved even further. So maybe I was just improving over time. Either way, I found this quite enjoyable because whether or not these things actually helped with my memory, like I said before, I still found myself studying Spanish a lot more than I would have otherwise. So I hope this video was interesting and helpful, and thank you so much for watching.